Very good. So good evening, everyone. This is the December meeting of the Bennington School District Board of Directors. Before we do anything, I don't know that this is 100% necessary, but I would like to make an amendment to the agenda. So the consent agenda includes warrants as number 2, and Ms. Gordon just passed out another voucher, another warrant that was not included in the packets. So this is for a payment for $304 for the subscription for electronic classroom, for renewing the subscription for the electronic lesson planning. So I just want to make sure that that is included in the warrants that are part of the consent agenda. So I don't know if it's necessary, but could I please have a motion to amend the consent agenda in that manner, please?
So moved.
Thank you, George, and second, Jackie. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great. So that has been noted thus. So we'll open it up for public comments. Hearing none. Going once, twice, 3 times. Very good. On to finance. So I see that Renee is here. And Renee, I'm wondering if you can speak to the change order, please, the BSD energy project. Thank you.
So this is actually just to formalize some of the changes that I'm pretty sure everybody's well aware of that had happened through the course of construction. I believe the board had a special meeting in the summer to approve the lighting changes at Monument. So that's kind of already a done deal. You had approved it, but this is just formalizing that document to go along with the construction documents we have. And then the other was asbestos. We know that we ran into asbestos in a number of places. So the contractor tried to find savings in his budget. Unfortunately, he got to a point where he could no longer afford to take it out of what we had already approved. So this is additional. So the $20,000 for additional asbestos abatement, which is an unforeseen condition. We didn't know, and that's why this is coming up. And then I also asked, because the controls are being housed on the server at the high school, that may have been, and probably was an expense that they were considering having to put our controls on a server on its own, but because we're actually using equipment that's already at the high school, they offered us a credit of $2,500. So the net effect is an increase of $42,500 to the overall contract.
Thank you. Any questions for Renee while she's standing in at the mic? Okay, very good. So we need to take some action on that.
I'll make the motion that we approve the change order to EEI for $42,500.
Thank you, Jackie. Could I have a
Second.
Thank you, George. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the change order, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And it carries. Thank you very much. And then there was the treasurer's report that was enclosed as well. Any questions about that? Okay, very good. So moving on. So we have the consent agenda, which we amended at the beginning of the meeting. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as published, please?
So moved.
Thank you, George. Could I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Chayla. Any discussion on approving the consent agenda? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Fantastic. Moving right along. Educational matters. We're going to start with Dr. Mujitz, since we're in your house today. How are you tonight?
Very good, thank you.
Good.
And welcome to Molly Stark. The 3 principals have elected to focus on an instructional issue, make it more of a theme. And we've chosen literacy. A year ago, last month, 18 members of SVSU, including representatives from each of the 3 BSD schools, attended a series of workshops and class through the Reading Institute in Williamstown involving a group called Bill for Literacy. So the intent was to bring a more coherent and coordinated approach to literacy. And as the title of the program suggested, Literacy Leaders, was equipping those people throughout the SVSU with the knowledge and pathway towards raising levels of performance in literacy. and conducting an audit, looking at what are the existing programs, practices, materials that are used, and how can we ensure that the program will be more cohesive and efficient. And there are a number of initiatives that are emerging out of that, notably the district's interest in looking at support materials in the form of a text in the primary grades. Additionally, in the presentation, the consultant that we worked with, who directed the class, looked at building a model of key ingredients, school schedules. So the schools have developed schedules that reflect literacy block and math as well. Interventionist schedules, and that's an attempt to coordinate the time, planning time for interventionists in math and literacy with classroom teachers to improve and promote collaboration. Managing the literacy block, and as you know, there's significant blocks here in orange that you can even see from the distance that you are, and that represents a block for literacy as opposed to 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there, 20 minutes where it can become fragmented and lose the thrust. Grade level team meetings, which the buildings have to promote collaboration, and data meetings. And colleagues are going to be talking a little bit more specifically on some of the nuances of the literacy program. But it's the end result was the SVSU's literacy needs assessment and a path towards improving the delivery of literacy.
Sure. So I was going to share a little bit about our tiered instruction, and the process and the strategies that we implement in our schools are based on Marzano research, and that is the professional development organization that translates research into strategies so that educators can use significantly advance learners and where they are and what they're doing. So tiered instruction in literacy actually involves the more than one area. We have tiered instruction in reading, we have it in math, social emotional components, and also behavioral. It's a school-wide approach that establishes a seamless connection between three basic components: standards aligned with the curriculum, research-based instructional practices, a comprehensive assessment system, and a problem-solving model. So this happens every single week with our colleagues when we meet in collaboration. We're actually looking at student data and turning it into action for instruction for all of our students. The differences are described across organizational factors, as you mentioned, the schedules, this wonderful color-coded master schedules that really define when everything happens in our school, and we make sure all those components are being addressed. Assessment factors, we have some very specific assessments. We have an assessment table for our entire SVSU, so we know when students are being assessed and we know what they're being assessed for, as well as some organizational strategies, which is groups and the group size of students. Students' growth is monitored, and instructional placements are adjusted accordingly if they're not making adequate process, and that's that data to action that happens during our collaborative times. We're benchmarking our students the entire school 3 times a year, and then we're progress monitoring all students that are receiving Tier 2 and Tier 3 instruction, and we do that bi-weekly. So we can chart if they are continuing to make progress, and if they're not, we decide if they need different instructional strategies and may move to Tier 3. Tier 2 instruction is based on performance and assessments, and it's the first layer of additional support that we provide for children outside of the Tier 1 core instruction. And it provides another opportunity for children to practice skills that are learned during that Tier 1 core instruction that happens for all kids. The Tier 1 instruction is 2.5 hours long for every student, K through 5, every day. And some of the things that are implemented with Fidelity are our foundations training, and Collins writing is also incorporated in there. We have reading groups. Kids are working with decodable readers at that very young age. And then also, as they move up, their reading is lexiled to where they understand and can comprehend, and where they're also challenged at the instructional level. Tier 2 instruction, groups are 5 to 8 students. They can be 30 minutes, 3 to 5 days a week. 8 to 20 weeks, they are progress monitored bi-weekly, and that instruction can happen either by the general educator or an interventionist or a reading specialist. If students don't show progress, they enter into Tier 3. And Tier 3 instruction is more explicit. It focuses on reading remediation skills, and it's provided for a longer duration of time. And this tier is not, please remember, this is not specialized instruction. This is not provided by our special educators. It's usually a group of 1 to 3 students, much smaller. Could be 45 to 120 minutes a day, 5 days a week, depending upon the need of the child. And it could go on for up to 20 weeks, typically no longer than that. And it's provided by an interventionist or a reading specialist. All levels of interventions are documented through our new educational support team. So as children move through this, we're documenting all of the strategies that children have needed in order to try and make that progress. And if possible, if the student doesn't make progress, then we might be moving towards a referral regarding a student that might be that might have a disability. So it might be an organic disorder. And then they're referred to our special ed intervention team and might then be considered for eligibility in special ed. That's it. You want to add something?
I neglected to mention that in support of this effort to focus on literacy at our monthly administrative team meetings, we use this book, which is It's About Time, and it's a book for a book club that the administrators meet in small groups, discuss certain passages. This is in the elementary school. The secondary leaders have another edition, but it's about planning interventions and extensions, and it supports the same, it's parallel to the plan that has evolved from our work with the literacy group, and that it focuses on managing blocks of time, promoting efficiency and effectiveness, and collaboration. So this is something that supplements the work that began a year ago last month.
So I'm going to take a little different approach to this, being new on board and spending the first year watching what's going on, and share a little bit with you about the role of the principal in ensuring the fidelity of literacy instruction. So at the last board meeting, we all shared with you student performance data so that you were able to glean some insights into where each of the schools are in terms of the gaps for student learning in some of the schools. So I'm going to come from that angle with you tonight. You've also learned from the SVSU Continuous Improvement Plan that literacy is at the center of what all of the schools are going to be looking at as the foundation for our work. And that will be reflected in each of our school improvement plans, which we're currently working on. So some of us, like Ben L, has some significant gaps in learning in literacy, and to turn that around is really going to be no easy task. Tonight, what I'd like to do is share with you just some information, and I have an article. I thought if we could share information, printed information with you each month, that might also help. The role of the principal in supporting how literacy instruction works in every classroom is actually vital. And I just want to quote from the first paragraph in this article. Any literacy program is only as good as the people who implement it. Thus, it is vital that we principals not only lead the learning when it comes to enacting and refining quality literacy instruction, but also take the time to build and maintain positive relationships with our teaching staffs. With a foundation of mutual respect and trust, a principal will have greater success in providing timely, constructive feedback that can be used to refine instructional practice. And that's really the place where I'm starting with my team. I can tell you that when I came to Ben L, I was struck by this sense that something was missing. I thought, what is it that's missing? And what it was missing was kids reading a lot, all the time, reading books, talking about books, asking for books. And I had the absolute pleasure of being in another school where kids would walk down the hall reading books and bump into walls because they couldn't put them down. And that's a bit of an exaggeration, but that's part of the vision that I have for Ben L. We need to be reading. I actually brought in 20 books to put out for free books for kids, and it took all week for them to be taken. They were like free books for kids, and it's not a focus of interest, so I'm putting that on our map. What we're going to do in all of our schools is create a culture of literacy. I think you've heard what Donna Cawley has talked about in Monument School, and that sets a really great model for the kind of structures that we might put into place. But in order to do that, all of us as principals have to be in classrooms almost daily, and we need to ensure the fidelity of that framework. And we'll share more of that with you as we go through the year. But I want to leave you with two big ideas. The first one is that this will require dedicated hard work over time in order to shift the culture and the practice of teaching at Ben L. And the second piece is our dual roles as principals is key in providing effective feedback. So we'll be working with teachers, not a gotcha mentality, but here's what I'm seeing, let's talk about what we can do to make it better, or tell me why you're doing that. So what I want to do is leave you with one of these articles. I'll just put them on the table, and you can share later on. The summary of the quality literacy instructional practice that we are implementing, and this is from a group of principals who are doing what our challenge is here, makes it seem like these were easy transitions to execute. However, in reality, it was far from easy. It was messy, challenging, and at times frustrating, but the effort was worthwhile. So I think this is a really good place to start. There's first order change and there's second order change. And what's going to need to happen to really make those pieces show up in our data over time is second order change. And I hope to be able to share more about that as we go through the year. So thank you.
And as an example of that, we've been very fortunate at all the start to be a recipient of a $25,000 grant through the Children's Literacy Foundation. And on the 18th of this month, we have Annual Literacy Night. And so there will be an author who will speak to parents, and those parents will attend 2 free books, and there'll be activities for kids as well. So as my colleagues have pointed out, literacy is the focal point that's really driving the continuous improvement plan. And we expect to see results in the metrics that measure our success. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
May I just make a comment?
Please.
I just want to thank all 3 of you. You know, Donna, we've been doing this for 5 years, and I'm just like, I must have a giant smile on my face tonight, because I'm just feeling that it's finally growing to a place where we're seeing the changes and we're engaging all of you in this wonderful work, because I could just hear it coming from your hearts. And also thank the staff for trying to move to these changes, which are difficult. As Edie was just saying, it's hard work, and it takes a long time to really shift our thinking and our strategies, because people get into patterns that they believe are working, and we have to look at it afresh and see, well, is it really working? And I think that we are building the comprehensive systems that we needed to have in place to move forward and we are feeling the movement now. Tonight, you're giving me great inspiration, so
Well,
thank you for that.
I enjoy, we have a weekly book club involving fifth graders that have lunch in my office and give up their recess so we can examine a book of their choice and work through it. So it's important that we model those expectations.
And I also just wanted to thank each of the principals and their staffs. Superintendent Culkeen and I did walkthroughs of all the buildings, and our focus this year of the walkthroughs is looking for literacy and seeing the evidence of good instruction in the classrooms, and looking for strengths and challenges, and how can we help guide the staff in all of our schools. Our leaders are working together now, and we try at every opportunity to bring the staff members together as well. We're doing a K1 reading instructional time where the teachers from those grade levels can share their strategies. They can see the differences between the schools, and they're looking at some other classes saying, well, how can we get there? And asking their peers to lead them. So it's really a wonderful opportunity.
Meredith, please.
Two things. Firstly, of course, we know that there's going to be a culture shift and it's going to take time. But I'm wondering, I know from Monument School, I know how much community involvement we have from our parents. But I'm wondering if in your two buildings, which I'm not attending your community events as much, are you seeing a gradual uptick in attendance of parent participation and community getting involved? And I know it's going to be a small uptick, if any.
So I would be able to, I would say that the events that involve families are really very well attended.
Are they?
Tomorrow night we'll be having something just for fifth grade, and it'll be interesting to see who attends and what the percentage is. So that's actually another.
Even just from like the first day, your first couple of weeks, just wondering if it's gently coming up.
I think the relationships are getting stronger. I'm right there, they're trusting me, they know me, they're
Right.
starting to say good morning and goodbye, and we had lots of phone calls and communication. So yeah, I think I would say yes for my school.
And we have a very active group of parents. The key is to transition from just simply coming in for the holiday bazaar or Thanksgiving meals or something, and be more focused on being a partner in literacy. So the turnout that we get, albeit during on the 18th during holiday shopping and busy time of the year, will be an indicator of that. But we can't just be in the school and expect our audience to
That's
come in.
true.
So one of the things that we've done is in conjunction with the Career Development Center and Willowbrook Housing, where approximately 1 out of every 8 of our learners comes from Willowbrook, that we have a free lending library that CDC had someone donate the funding for all of the materials, and Brian Kuhn, who's a buildings and trade instructor at Willowbrook and who grew up at CDC, who grew up at Willowbrook, he and a crew of very talented learners at the high school level came over. They constructed six foot by 6 foot bookshelves, very sturdy. And I was over there today. There are several hundred, maybe just short of 1,000 books there. So that we want to go outside the walls of the school to try to cultivate an interest in literacy. And there are books there for high school age learners. There are books there that adults would be interested in. So it's to, like any business, you might want to attract customers by having a sale, but you hope to convince them there are other reasons to come back. And we've done a good job, I think, at our school in having parents come in for those traditional school activities, whether it's parent-teacher conferences, open house, and those traditional experiences. But now we want to bring them in and engage them as partners in promoting literacy.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else with any questions? Please, Jackie.
I was wondering, is there any way we can see a copy of the needs assessment the SVSU did? For
Needs
literacy?
assessment? Yeah.
Is it online?
It's on the Google Doc, right?
It's in a Google Doc, but it wouldn't be that, I don't think that would be public. We could share it with you.
Okay.
I have another question.
Yes.
Last year in March, when we go before the town and we have the town meeting, a question came up about special education. And the question was, and I paraphrase it, is how have we reduced the need for special education in the town, in our schools? And at that time, no one of us had an answer for that, at least on the board. So between now and March, can I ask you to look at that and see how we can reduce the numbers of special ed students in our schools? Because right now it averages about 22%. And as we go up in our goals and reading improvement and other improvements, I'm wondering if this will be reduced too. I don't know, you were the experts, and I don't know how we can do that, or if it's unrealistic at this point, but that's a question that will come up again in March.
So Jackie, are you asking for specific strategies to be presented?
No, I'm asking for an answer that we can have in March.
So it was Charlie Jingo, I think is the
Yes,
question that you're
uh-huh.
referring to at town meeting, had asked exactly what you just said. So can you just please reiterate the question you're hoping to have an answer to?
How can we reduce the need for special education or the need for special ed in our schools? And his question was, why doesn't the number go down? You know, and sometimes it's based upon poverty because children haven't been exposed. Sometimes it's based upon environmental problems, birth problems. There's all kinds of problems. So I don't know exactly if we could give an answer to that question, but I'd certainly like to be ready for one.
Oh,
I could give.
excuse me.
So just a minute, please, George. I think we need to be clear that I think it's improper for us to necessarily direct that question to our principals, but I think certainly we can make the request of the superintendent and assistant superintendent to have some idea. With that said, I think many of the strategies that we've discussed, even tonight, but certainly in other meetings, will contribute to that. The full embrace of PBIS, the full embrace of multi-tiered systems of support, the instruction strategies and the strategies we have to help our students in general, I think will all serve that end in the end. I'll serve that goal in the end, but I think it's definitely, let's ask that question of Jim to have him be able to prepare an answer for us.
I want to support what you're saying, merely saying, Jackie, I hear what you're saying, but I think that I don't want to see that put on our principals. I think that that's an issue that should be handled at the supervisory union level with the central office, because it involves a lot more than our building principals doing that. So, and that's number one. Number two, I don't think it's realistic to ask that for March. I know what you're saying and I agree with what you're saying, but I think it's going to take some time to do that, and we've got to involve a lot more than just our building principals.
Well, it was asked almost a year ago, so
Yeah.
I think we need to work towards it.
Yes, I do
Whether
too.
we have the whole answer or part of the
Yeah.
answer, but I think it's going to come up again.
That's right.
And I feel like part of the question was like the reduction in the number of IDPs.
Yes, that was actually there was a finer point to
There's
the
a finer
question, which
point to
was,
it.
does anybody ever leave
The
SPED?
IDPs, right.
Yeah.
And I think it was sort of answered that evening, if I recall, because I believe the answer was yes and no. Some leave SPED
others
and
come out.
graduate out, but then you also have some that come in at the K-1-2 level, and so that number tends to hover in that area. I recall that question sort of being answered that evening.
And if I recall last meeting, there was a lot of talk about the work that's being done in the pre-K level and how that's the hope is, and we're seeing very positive results there, that that's going to reduce the number that potentially go in at that level.
And
So
identifying it at a younger age.
hopefully, we will be seeing a reduction in the overall number if we're reducing the number that come in at that level, and then we have people rolling off.
Right.
So,
Well, the stats don't say that. The stats have increased.
I think it's important to understand, however, that it's multifaceted. For example, if we have a learner who's visually impaired,
It will not change.
it will not change. The degree of compensation, that is, how can a child compensate, to learn to compensate for a disability might minimize the intensity of the intervention, but that child will always have an IEP based on someone who has a medical condition, a visual impairment. The early intervention certainly is designed to reduce the number of learners identified in special needs. The Tier 2 and 3 instruction, and similarly, is the hope and promise of that, an early intervention in conjunction with the multi-tiered system of interventions that we have may reduce the number of kids who qualify for special education, because it's the gap between achievement and the ability that can qualify a learner. So if we can address that gap, and that's the target of our literacy program, that can help minimize that. Now, in the last month, we've had 2 learners enrolled in school with IEPs that are of the nature that they're not going to be mitigated. You can compensate, but those numbers won't go down. So it is multifaceted. It's early intervention. It's a very coherent, comprehensive program designed to provide interventions at the level of need to close the gap that could prompt a learner to be qualified for special education. But there has to be the understanding that if a child has an existing medical condition, that's not going to change, except maybe the degree of intervention necessary.
And if I could also just add a piece to that, you can have children who have disabilities and who are being supported through an individual education plan. It's very important that those children also make progress. That doesn't mean that they don't make progress. That's why we progress monitor even our students who are identified. For a very good reason. They may not make progress at the same rate, but we're to ensure that all children make progress, regardless of whether they are disabled or not.
May I just add one last thing?
Let's have Jackie ask her question, and then maybe we'll address it. Thank you.
You know, I think one of the things needs to be explained is that just because they have special ed services or IEPs, that it doesn't mean that they're not going to be valuable to the community when they graduate from high school.
Exactly.
It's not all that they can't learn, or they won't be able to work, or they won't be able to be, good for society. Somehow that has to, people get the idea that if kids on an IEP or special ed, that we're going to be taking care of them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
There are people out there that believe that, and it's not necessarily true, because a lot of people, a lot of autistic kids, they grow up, they be doctors, they be teachers, they be whatever, So somehow we have to get the stigma taken off of being on special ed and IEPs.
Thank you for that point, Jackie, for sure. Dr. Lee.
Yes, thank you, Jackie. I appreciate that especially. I just wanted to mention that one thing that we have worked on very hard over the past year, and it's really starting to be well in place now, is our educational support teams in every school. And that was a big effort. Donna and I were on the team that really redid that whole system so it's consistent in every school. because there was sort of a growing philosophy that if a child wasn't learning at a certain rate, well, then they must need an IEP. No. Let's look at the instruction they're getting, let's look at their assessments and see if they're learning, and let's try some strategies and see if it works over a period of time and then reconsider. So the educational support teams are very strong now about putting all the data on the table and looking at it and trying different strategies way before anyone is ever referred for an IEP. And that is what is going to reduce your special ed numbers, because they have been artificially inflated by just saying that child needs a special ed. No, they don't. They may not have had good instruction. So let's look at improving the instruction and bringing them up to grade level with good instruction and extra efforts, which we call universal precautions for everybody.
Thank you.
I have one more question, and maybe I should direct this at Donna. When Jackie Prue and I went to the board meeting up in Fairleigh, Vermont, one of the things that Secretary Holcomb continued to address, she addressed it in her opening speech and then in the conference that Jackie and I attended, was that no child in Vermont should have a one-to-one para.
She said.
And I don't know if that's true in our district.
Well, that's a giant topic, and I would leave it to Chris whether you want to start that conversation this evening.
I think it's an important topic.
It is important.
I think it should become its own agenda item, though, so
Right.
folks who have an interest in that can show up for sure.
Good.
So,
Well, I don't know how that's reconciled with our district and the state, or whether they just have to wait and see if they find us, or...
well, I mean, I don't know that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know that Secretary Holcomb said that it is forbidden by law
Yeah.
for there to be a one-on-one, but simply that maybe that does not make the best fiduciary sense. I mean, and I don't know, but I don't know that that's in
She
stone.
wasn't speaking about fiduciary.
It's not educationally sound.
No, she was saying more that, and you could probably read this in all of her speeches, that why should our least vulnerable students, our most vulnerable students, be taught by people who have the least amount of education? And so that's, I think, rather than fiduciary, she's more interested in the teaching expertise that these children are receiving. So.
Sure, and it's on
Thank
my
you.
note for the agenda for January. Thank you for bringing that up. So thank you, everyone, for that discussion.
Thank you.
Moving on to policies, we have two policies to warn. These are both modifications to existing policies. Policy 1100 is the immunization policy, and the change that's been made there is the recommendation is to remove the moral objection to getting immunizations. It retains the religious objection, but it strikes the moral objection. Yes, Meredith?
Why? Why was that one phrase removed? Is that a state recommendation?
It's the law.
It's the law.
Thank you. So could I please have a motion to warn policy 1100, please?
So moved.
Thank you, George. Could I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Chayla. Any further discussion about 1100?
Well, I can give you a little background on that. 2 years ago, and then last year, there was an outbreak of measles in Rutland, and they had to close school for several months, or a month, almost a month. So that's one of the reasons. They want more kids to be
Thanks, yeah.
immunized.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So all in favor of warning policy 1100, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, it carries. And then we're to warn policy 2600, which is the superintendent evaluation. The modifications here talk about, it modifies the timelines, the time frame for the evaluation of the superintendent, and proposes some changes to wording about how the superintendent is evaluated. So, could I please have a motion to warn 2600?
So moved.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, George. Any discussion on warning
Yes.
2600? Yes.
I have a question. Why are we changing the timeline?
It's my understanding that the timeline has been changed, has been proposed to be changed to jive with the contract period, with a contract timeline. As it currently states, it sort of, it don't quite match up, and so it's
Okay.
difficult to do that.
Then there's been it used to, so there's been modifications.
It really depends when the superintendent's contract may begin or end, and so
Yeah.
the dates in here, if they're set at a certain part, might just be, they just shouldn't have specific dates. It just should be because they don't match up.
The only problem is, with that is if you're doing an evaluation and the recommendation is not to extend the contract because of the evaluation, doesn't that usually have to be done in a certain amount of time so it's not grievable?
I think that's in the superintendent's contract. That has to be prior to a certain number of days, but then the days don't line up with the dates in here, so
Okay.
then it is confusing.
They contradict each other.
Yeah.
All right, I understand now.
Any further discussion about 2600? Very good. So all those in favor of awarding 2600, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it carries. Moving on to committee reports, and a twofer from Meredith. So Meredith, could you please speak about the Ad-Hoc Lice Policy Committee, please?
Well, firstly, I only cough when I talk, so I apologize in advance. The Lice Policy Committee had been scheduled for last month. We had a really low attendance, so we rescheduled for December 13th of this month. I've been in discussion with Karen Krolikowski to see how many people we have on board, and again, I only have 3 people interested, but I also expressed an interest to send a personal invitation out from myself, and I wrote up an invitation just to staff in the district because I really think it'd be beneficial to have more people in the room than just myself, who doesn't know a heck of a lot about implementation within the building and doing things in a way that can be timely and happen in this school year. So at this point, we're supposed to hold an ad hoc lice policy committee next week, the 13th. I think we're going to have low attendance again, but I would like to send out an invitation and see if I can get a few more people out of the woodwork to come so we can have a good, productive conversation. Not contagious, I promise. So that's where I'm at with that. So we haven't done that yet.
Okay.
Second thing, so I was SVSU, the alternate. So it was a very, very long, productive meeting. Public comments were made by Jackie Prue, which I think she's going to mention in a little while, so I'll speak to those after what was discussed. But as far as the long and the short of the SVSU, there was a ton of policies that were adopted: 1100, 3100, 3115, 4121, 4327, and 5411 were all adopted. As far as the budget portion of the meeting, Renee did a very long presentation, and all of the different committees did a very long, extensive presentation. It was good. It was very descriptive. And I think the best thing I got out of it was that everybody is really generally content. And the cost of things has gone down, or it's generally low. The only significant increase, and I'm sure you'll speak to this at some point, but I'm trying to be quick, is human resources. He sees that we have a large exposure, and they'll speak to that, and he's really the only one with a significant increase, which is 15%, but several of the areas within the SU are low. They're actually asking for less than usual. So overall, it made the increase 0.81%. So is that a good synopsis?
Yeah, and I'll touch upon
Yeah,
highlights.
I don't need
We have a budget meeting
to
on
say
Monday.
everything that you're going to say, but overall, it was a long, very detailed, good meeting, and I think a lot was done. So that's that.
I have one question or comment. Maybe you shouldn't schedule it for next week because it's parent conference week,
Maybe what?
your lice meeting.
I did not speak with Karen directly. I think she's not getting any response.
Because it's parent conference week?
Possibly, but not last month wasn't.
Oh.
So, yes, and in my invitation, I did say I'm happy to switch the time and the day. But yeah, maybe that would be. So, I'll work on it this week. See if I can push out another invitation.
Because we have a finance meeting too next week.
Monday.
We do Monday.
I don't, do we?
Yes, Monday.
Yeah, BSD, so that
Okay.
may be, you may want to move your,
I don't mind moving it.
We're
I
gonna
just would really like some
Talk
time.
about even more things we're going to try to fit in between.
Yeah, I know, and budget
now
season's
and
not gonna make
23rd.
it good, but I think pushing it out further, the school year's ticking away.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Meredith.
Yes.
So probably the big one tonight. So item number 7 on the agenda, the Act 46. So just to recap, a lot's happened since this board met last. We had the vote for the Act 46 merger. Overall, with all the townships, it was 1,533 yes votes to 766 no votes, which is significant. Here in Bennington for the BSD, it was nearly a 3-to-1 for versus against, with 965 voting for and 338 voting against. Shasberry also approved, but Pownell and Woodford did not approve. Pownell by a margin of 4 votes and Woodford by a margin of 2 votes. In order for the merger to have happened, we needed BSD as well as 2 others. We did not get that. So what does that mean? It means a couple things. One, we as a board need to do something called the Act 46 Section 9 explanation. And that's a requirement within the law that says if the school board does not merge with other school boards, basically you need to make your pitch saying why you don't need to merge. So we're going to get back to that. But an interesting thing to note, just a few hours ago, the Woodford board voted to warned a revote. That revote is going to happen on January 9th. So our Section 9 proposal is due on the day after Christmas, the 26th, but the Woodford vote is going to happen on the 9th. So apparently, word from AOE is that if there is going to be a revote and there is I don't know who said this originally, these were the words that I heard, there is a reasonable expectation that the merger will pass at the revote, then you do not have to submit your Section 9 proposal. I don't think it's safe to presume that the merger will be approved, so I think we still need to move forward with the Section 9. So that raises the question of what do we put in our Section 9 proposal? Just a minute, I will certainly get to you because I have an idea for you, Jackie, so I will definitely be speaking to you. So one thing that this board never did, this board never took a vote whether or not it was in favor of the merger plan. What we did, we voted to warn a vote, allowing the community to it, but this board in and of itself we never even did a straw vote saying who thinks this is a good idea, who doesn't think this is a good idea. The board vote to warn the community vote was 5-2. So I would like to just ask the question now. For those of us who are here at the table, those of us who comprise this board, who here was in favor of the merger as set forth in the Articles of Agreement? Okay, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to make that official. So one school of thought has it, and I'm almost done talking because I do want to hear other people's thoughts on this. One school of thought has it that because the majority of this board was in favor of the merger, that we should not submit a Section 9 proposal, or that what we should do is attach our Articles of Agreements to the Section 9 form and say, this is what we think. That's one school of thought. I think that has its risks because who knows what will come of that. The other school of thought is we do our best to propose that what we have works, and that's what we submit to AOE. So this is what I would propose, and before I even ask for a motion, I'm just going to put this out there as my thought. I propose that Jackie Prue head up an ad hoc committee to draft a Section 9 proposal, and that this board gather again in a week's time, in 10 days' time, to approve that report. That would give us enough time to, so let's say, so tonight's the 6th, let's say we meet on the 14th to review it. We could then reconvene on the 21st and make final adjustments to submit it on time for the 26th. That's a tight time frame, but I think that would give this board a voice in making its Section 9 proposal. the person who would head that up, you, Jackie Pruitt, is someone who believes that what we do works anyway. You've said that before. You've been vocal about that. And that is our course of action. That's what I'm thinking, but I will stop talking now, and anyone else who has other ideas, please share them. Jackie Pruitt.
Number one, we're first going to have a revote. We all have to have a revote. There's no incentives. And without the incentives, it's a different vote.
So you're absolutely right on that. So from what I understand, AOE has been, I'll say cagey, maybe that's not the most accurate term to use. I will say AOE has not committed to saying whether or not the incentives are on the table or off the table. Absolutely, you're right. If the incentives are off and they definitively say that they're off the table, absolutely, because the voters in Bennington and Shasberry voted with those incentives in mind. So if this is a different deal, absolutely, everyone should have their say again. But I don't know that that's a for sure answer yet.
Well, they're opening themselves up for a huge legal mess, and they're already being sued. So they can do whatever they want.
They can do whatever they
there.
want, right.
As far as the Section 9, I need all my notes back. Dan.
I hope I can find that. I think I can.
It's a notebook.
In the fireplace.
But, yeah, I can do it, but I think that really this board should be working with the other boards because most of the information is going to be similar. And most of this information, Dan French culled together to come up with the Articles of Agreement, where you have to give the financial and the educational and that kind of stuff. Now, nobody remembered at the SVSU meeting except Merity and myself that when Dan French was at the table talking about it, he said that a lot of the information he was developing could be used if the vote failed. And we need that information, and Nelson, chair of the SVSU, asked the superintendent to get that from Dan French so that it could be used in the Section 9 Act 46 report.
Do you know, did Jim provide a response about that?
When I had mentioned, one of the reasons I had voted for Dan French was because he was useful in either scenario. He didn't recall Dan saying that was the case, but I feel strongly if we've already paid for his services, we might as well utilize the information that he's already gotten, and all of the districts that need to now file a Section 9 can utilize those services that have already been done. So I believe Jim said that he was going to contact Dan, because if that information has already been compiled and she decides to do this and convene an ad hoc committee, that at least some of that information is available currently, and we can have a quick jump point. That's the first thing I think. The second thing I think is I don't believe in writing deadlines and hoping that Woodford will have a revote January 9th. I strongly believe that we need to move forward as if it's not happening, and we need to be ready for our own deadline, and whatever happens with Woodford happens. But I think once their tourist out-of-town population that owns a lot of camps up there comes back to town, I don't think it's going to pass. I think it's going to actually go worse.
Okay.
The superintendent also was supposed to set up a carousel meeting for all the boards to discuss how they wanted to move forward with this, because we should be working together to come up with these reports.
So I can't speak to the carousel meeting. I do know that Jim did have a conversation with Dan French. The information that Jim relayed to me is slightly different, stems from a different question than what the two of you just raised. The question that Jim asked was, would Dan help draft the Section 9 proposal? And the answer to that was no.
He did say that very plainly at the Act 46 meetings.
But what I'm hearing is a different question. I'm hearing is, it's just simply that pile of information that Dan French had to compile in order to help author the
I'm not sure what the Section 9 looks like. I don't know if there's a ton of data mining that needs to happen. So my concern is that there is a boatload of data mining that needs to happen to be submitted. If Dan French already has those numbers, it just seems logical.
Yeah, okay, so I will follow up with Jim. Well, actually, Jackie, do you want to follow up with Jim directly about that information? Just the raw data that Dan French? Okay. So-
Also, Nelson Brownell has asked Bill Bozzo to talk to the AOE about extending the deadline.
For the Section 9? And I think some of those conversations have taken place. I don't know if it was Bill, but somebody has been chatting with AOE about, easing off a little bit.
Also, Jim mentioned that he has been talking with Steve Stitzel about these reports, but he didn't go into detail what he was talking to him about. So, we do pay Steve Stitzel quite a bit of money.
Just to clarify for our audience, could we say, when we speak a name like Steve Stitzel, could we say he's the BSD lawyer?
He's the SVSU lawyer.
He's the SVSU, because people who
You're right, yeah.
are listening don't know
We get
who's
used to
who.
it. Yep, thank you. That's a good point, Jackie. Thank you for that.
So to your point that you made about the thought process of kind of not doing anything or submitting the merger proposal, I mean, part of me feels like it's kind of we're speaking out of both sides of our faces when we put forth this merger proposal, our town approved it, and now we're saying what we think works. I feel like we're saying two different things.
I think that, and I know how I'll vote, I think that none of us has to vote to support the Section 9, but it has to be prepared.
Right.
And so just like some folks didn't support the merger, there are going to be folks that don't support the Section 9. So
I think that's true, too. I think it's up to...
Chris, I'm not going to spend 2 weeks writing up a Section 9 if this board is not going to vote to accept it, so let me know.
So so let me ask the question then. Will you chair an ad hoc committee for a Section 9 or no?
Well, if we're not going to support it, why bother wasting our time?
So much like the perennial question of policies versus admin regs and the chicken before the egg and how do you support one without knowing the other?
Do you have a lot of time, Chris?
I don't have a lot of time, which
I
is in
don't
part
either.
why I looked at Jackie Prue to write the Section 9.
I don't mind
But-
chairing a committee, but if it's for nothing, then I don't want to do it.
So I guess it's difficult for any of us to say that if it'll be for nothing or if it will result in something that we can support without having seen the report that we come up with.
Just to clarify in my mind, I didn't think that we would have to approve the Section 9. In my opinion, this is going to be a questionnaire where we are filling out exactly what we're doing as a school district.
Yeah, basically.
And basically, you're just filling in the blanks. I'm not sure that there's anything to approve. So I guess I'm unclear as to
I
why
think
it
you're
would
right.
need approval. It seems to me this is a mandate. This is a questionnaire, and we're to fill in the blanks and submit it, and we have been given a deadline. It doesn't really seem like an approval or a non-approval sort of a question. It seems like a statement.
So
I think you're right, Meredith.
I could be wrong. I haven't seen the Section 9. I don't know what it looks like. I think it's just data.
It was in the,
I read
Yes.
that, but is that, in my
Yes,
opinion,
we
we're
just
just
got-
answering those questions, which to me is a questionnaire.
So let's just kind of bring it back together.
I'll
So
take it.
Well, I have
you
more
will ta- you'll take
questions.
Okay, thank you.
I have more questions before you bring it back together.
So, well, just not bring that back together, bring some order to the conversation,
okay.
that's all. So, in my view, Meredith, this is an official document being issued forth by this board, so it should have the majority of this board behind it, which is why I think it should be.
But all we're doing is confirming that the data is accurate.
And I don't know that, because just as the two of you just said, we have the thing that was in the board packet about what needs to be addressed in it. I'm unsure, and I'm unclear, and I have not heard from Jim or anyone else. Is there a form to be filled out? Is it free form? Is there some structure to how this is to be presented? And I don't know the answer to that.
And from the conversations we had in the Act 46 committee and from the presentation that we received, it almost seemed like this was a justification of why we would want to stay the way we are and not a questionnaire. That's not the way that it was
Right.
presented to us.
Yep, and we're in the difficult position because the majority of the board
Right.
and the majority of the
Town.
Public.
the citizenry of the BSD thought we should merge. So we are in a difficult position. It is difficult, so Dan.
So I think it's pretty clear that that is something we have to approve, because if you just read one section that's required, we have to submit a proposal to the Secretary and State Board of Education that proposes one of three things: to retain its current governance structure. I know how I stand on that. To work with other districts to form a different governance structure. That's going to take some time, and maybe we just refer what we've already done. And the third is to enter into another model of joint activity. So this is something we have to make a decision, and as a board, we have to support it. This isn't just, hey, here's how we operate now. We have to make a decision.
See, this is a bit of a quandary, because this makes more sense for the towns that voted it down
Right.
to be doing
Way
this,
more of the
and it does
time.
not make
That's how
sense
I
for the
feel.
town that voted it in
Right.
by a large margin.
Exactly my point.
Well,
Now,
then couldn't you submit a proposal that says to work with other districts to form a different governance structure and submit what you already have voted on?
yes, and that was my question, because I wanted to know, where does Shasberry stand?
In terms of what, Jackie?
Well, do they still want to merge with us?
Well, I would not presume to speak for Shasberry. I don't know that it was ever a question of Shasberry wanting to merge with us. I think it was a question of, did the voters of Shasberry want to adopt the merger structure, which included us and Woodford and Pownell.
And MAU.
And MAU, for that matter. So I think it's hard to say. I don't think any of us are in a position to say.
Because that's number 2.
Sure, but I don't think any of us are in a position to say that BSD and Shasberry should merge, or that they would want to merge.
Can we reach out to them before we go through all these steps? Because they have to do this too.
Sure. So I'm joking before, but I do have confidence in you, Jackie, that you can pull together something that will be coherent and that will make sense and that can be coercive to members of this board. You have a ton of experience in the previous iterations of the committees for merger. You're informed. You've been in the thick of this for years now. So I know that you can do a good job with the reports and that you bring it back and we will take a look at it. So any other questions about Act 46 and the Section 9?
Yeah, I want a committee.
Who would you like on your committee? I empower you as the chair of this ad hoc committee to pick out 2 people.
Who wants to be on it?
I'd love to do it. This is the worst possible month ever.
Believe me, I know.
This is the worst possible time of year.
Who has time? George?
No, yes, I don't, I think we should get some of the other people, some other members of the board
Who are
on
on
it
the
as well.
committee.
Yeah, Jackie, I'd be glad to work with you, but I don't want to come back in and say, well, we know where you stand and we know where Jackie stands, so we better get some of these other board members sitting here to join the committee.
So any other volunteers to sit on the ad hoc committee for the Act 46, Section 9 proposal?
I would do it, but I'm going to be out of town, in Hawaii.
If you would like, I will go to Hawaii for you.
I'll go for you, you can chair it.
Or you can bring Jackie and George with you and you do the work on the beach.
George will meet, that's it.
So who's on it?
I'll do it.
You got time?
No, I do not. I will do it.
You got time during the day?
I'll figure it
So we
out.
got 3,
Okay.
I'm still confused of
all right?
what is that committee doing? Are they coming up with one of those 3?
I think it's the responsibility of that committee.
I think, in my opinion, and this is the chance to change my thought on that, I think, in my opinion, we go through these questions one by one, these bullet points, and we do it the way the voters had asked, using our merger documents that are already existing, and tap into Dan French's data that he already has if we need it.
So then we're essentially providing a merger document.
I guess, but I would have to.
I think that's, I don't think we can presume that. I think we need to.
I think we have to go with what our constituents want.
Right.
And reach out to Shasberry to see if they want to join us.
There's also the idea of having a carousel meeting that is still being worked on.
Donna, can you speak to how that,
And Mary,
where
I
that
could be your
stands?
alternate.
I'll ask Karen whether
Okay, thank you.
she's trying to set that up.
All right. So we have a few, so here's what is happening now. So the ad hoc committee about the Section 9 is chaired by Jackie with Meredith and George. Thank you to the 3 of you for taking that on. We need to set a time for us to come back to review the draft of that document. The week from today is the Lice Committee. The day following is the 14th. I don't, does that work for folks if we were to have a brief meeting on the 14th to review?
No, you can't do that in 1 week.
No.
Yeah.
So what I'm looking at is the time frame between now and the 26th when it's due. So I think we need to come together at least once and to have enough time for a second round consideration.
How many times are we gonna meet for,
Budget.
Budget, that's, well, so,
Can we just extend that?
so do we, is the thought that we make the budget meeting a budget / section 9 meeting? No, okay.
I'll tell you why, because you're gonna be so tired.
Sure. You're right.
After you get done with budget. Nobody wants
Especially
to.
the first meeting.
Yeah.
Maybe we could, why don't we tentatively set it for, let's say, the 15th? Friday the 15th.
That's a
sounds-
Friday.
Yeah, never mind.
Why don't we do it on the 18th, and then we can come back later that week if you want it rewritten?
That will be tough.
Monday.
Because there's a school concert that,
Oh, and it's
That-
also the
that evening.
literacy night.
it's a literacy night.
Okay. I didn't know.
You could do it right, you could do it
Anything
right
on
before.
Tuesday, guys?
You know, be.
Tuesday, the 19th?
Is there?
I could do Tuesday night.
We're right up on Christmas by then.
Yep.
The 19th is SVSU.
Oh,
So I do wonder if the folks at AOE realized that the 26th was the day after Christmas.
Oh, I'm sure they did. But, you know, we also had 3
They said Merry
weeks.
Christmas right in the memo.
Did it say right?
It did not.
The other thing I'd like to ask is, can we reach out to our senators and representatives and ask them to help us?
With asking for extensions of the
Yes,
time?
yes.
Okay.
Budget night.
Well, we'll leave that up to Jackie, who she can get for help.
So,
Sure.
well, I mean, I feel like that committee has enough to do. Would this board empower me to reach out to our local representatives and ask them to speak on our behalf to AOE about extending
Yes.
timeframes?
Yes.
Okay. Just for the sake of formality, can I have a motion to that end, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Could I have a second?
Second?
Thank you. Any discussion about empowering the chair to speak to the legislators about extending the time frame? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Okay, so I will talk to the legislators. So in terms of setting a time to come back, did we want 19th? Did we land on that?
That's SVSU.
SSVSU.
It's VSU.
What time is SVSU?
What's going on the 14th?
5 is a regular meeting, 5:30 is budget.
What's with the
I have nothing on the 14th.
Shayla, I mentioned it. Sorry.
What date are we talking
Meeting was
about?
at 5.
So how does Tuesday, December 14th sound to come back?
Tuesday,
not
December
correct.
14th is not
Thursday,
Thursday.
December 4th. I'm sorry if I misspoke. Thursday, December 14th.
What time?
We can put that open. I know George has limitations to when he can come out.
No, I'll work
Tuesday,
you.
December
Okay.
14th, you said?
Thursday, December
Thursday
14th.
the 14th,
Thursday.
but earlier would be better for me than 7.
How about 5:30?
I could do that.
6 is good for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, 6 would be better for me,
Will we
too.
be done by
6.
7?
What time?
6?
Will we be done by 7?
I have PTG from 5:30 to 6:30.
Well, it should be written.
Okay.
So it should be written, and as part of the
It should
warned,
have been emailed prior, so.
as part of the warning for, and the warned agenda for that meeting, it should include the write-up, so people will have the chance to say, and I would even extend this, that if folks can't make that meeting, provided we have a quorum, if people want to give me their feedback on that report, I will present that.
They can call in.
Not if they're in another meeting, though, which is the
No,
issue,
no.
yeah.
But
And I could be here at 6:30, I just can't be here at 6,
Where's here?
6:30.
wherever.
Wherever.
If it was here, it'd be even more convenient, because that's where I'll be.
Why don't we, the interest of kind of the majority, if we can say 6, with the understanding that you.
I'll be
Does
late.
that work? Okay, all right, so 6 o'clock,
Here?
the 14th?
We won't know yet.
Yeah,
You have to pick a spot, but if it's here, that's getting me here even.
sure, why don't we shoot for here? Dr. Muditz, do you happen to know if anything's happening in this room, or will there be an empty space for us on Thursday, the 14th? Thank you. All right, so let's say here, and I will mention it to Karen to warn that meeting. Yes, George?
Away from that for just a minute.
Okay.
I noticed that when you sent your emails out on
I got 7 days.
the budget meeting, some people mentioned an earlier date. Can we talk about that for a minute? Do people we have it set for 7, but I mean,
Earlier time.
No earlier time?
Earlier time.
do you want an earlier, yeah, what's the thinking of the board members of setting that up earlier
On the
for that
11th?
budget? I noticed that
Yeah.
Jackie Kelly said she'd like it earlier if possible. I could make it that day, that particular day at 5 o'clock,
This is the 11th, right?
So,
6 o'clock.
Yeah, parent-teacher conferences till 5:30.
so for the sake of fidelity to the agenda, let's just table that for a moment, because we'll get to that in just a
Gotcha.
moment, okay?
All right.
So any other conversation about the Act 46, Section 9 bits? Okay, so moving on from that. Dr. Leap, will you be providing an assistant superintendent report, or shall we skip over that?
I think that we had a nice discussion about all the wonderful work going on in the schools, and I was going to speak to our walkthroughs, and I think that we've done that. If you want, I could tell you a little bit more about our Every Student Succeeds Act, but I think with all that information, I would save it for another meeting.
Okay.
Because it's big.
Check. Okay, so moving on to the chair's report, where we will speak about budget stuff. I included the web link in the agenda, just so folks could access the information themselves, but it's going to be a crazy budget season, because we have, it's what is it, $47 million hole in the ed fund, from the governor shifting around funds to prop up, that was the term used in Vermont Digger, to prop up this year's budgets. So that's a massive hole that needs to be filled. The governor is projecting a 7% property tax increase. And I guess I wanted to put it out there to know that the board is going to do everything it can, but the idea of slashing services to our students and slashing the way we fund our schools probably isn't going to happen, because that's not the right thing for our communities or for our students or for our families or for our teachers. So this is going to be a difficult budget season. But I did want to thank Renee. Renee put together a great tutorial for board members about what the budgeting process is like, and she also has offered some one-on-one tutorials. I had mine today, so it's very helpful. So thank you, Renee, for that. And Renee turned me on to a very helpful video that we should all watch, and that anyone watching at home should watch. It's on the Vermont School Boards Association webpage. It's about an 11-minute video that talks about how schools get funded. And it is soupier and more complicated than you would ever imagine it could be. And
You think I know, but I don't.
and it's, so anyone who pays taxes should probably watch that, just to get a sense of what boards are up against and what communities are up against, and the efforts of the district administrators and the building administrators in making sure that things get paid for. We do have our first budget meeting currently scheduled for this coming Monday at 7 o'clock. But maybe we want to change that. First, I would turn to Renee. Renee, do you have other availability on Monday the 11th, other than 7 o'clock?
Yes, I can meet anytime.
So would everyone here be able to meet at 6 o'clock
Yes.
on the 11th?
I have a select board meeting, so I wouldn't be able to come anyways at all.
Okay, okay.
So between 6 and 8. So if it was earlier than that, so if later than that, would hope not. But so I won't be able to attend, not because I don't want to, but because I will be at a select board.
Okay. All right, so would everyone, including Renee, be good with moving the budget meeting on Monday from 7 o'clock to 6 o'clock?
Yes.
Okay, so.
And where?
Central office, central office. And is that, and this is a question for anyone who can answer it, does that need to be warned, and if it does, has it been warned? Do we know if Karen's warned?
Karen warns it,
Should
but
be
yes,
warned.
it has to be
Yes.
warned.
Okay, yeah. So when I speak to Karen about warning the meeting on the 14th, I'll just make sure she's warned.
Anytime you have more than,
More than quorum. Or
Quorum, you have to
present.
warn.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Okay, we'll call that it for the chair's report. And then there were just a number of FYI items. There's a student enrollment. Here's something that I should have included in my chair's report, so I'm going to step back out of that. Bennell was recognized as an exemplar school for Vermont PBIS for the 2016-17 school year. So congratulations. So well done. So that's the FYI items. And then we have it set to adjourn into executive session as per 1 VSA section 313A3. which has to do with evaluating or appointing employees. I do not anticipate that we'll have any actionable items coming out of that. So, can I please have a motion to adjourn into executive session?
So moved.
Thank you. A second. Very good. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Very good. Thank you.
Jackie.